welcome and thank you for joining us. I have a dear friend of mine, Karen Wilson, here joining us to talk about her journey. Karen and I met through, well, actually, Karen booked a tarot reading with me. It's probably about 5 months ago, it feels, or 4 months ago. And through that moment, I offered Karen some release work of the work that I do with the Dr. Michael J. Lincoln. And this is how our relationship started. And this is how Karen's transformative journey also began as well. So, welcome, Karen. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your experience.
Very happy to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. So, Karen, I want to first have you talk about yourself in the perspective of how you are seen in the outer world, your accomplishments, how people know and recognize you today. And then we're going to go into your inner self. We're going to go into the inner journey. But I first want to chat about, because you do have an exceptional history, you have an exceptional story, and I want to go into all the different aspects of your life experience, your accomplishments, and go right into the core of your being with this conversation, especially with that transformative journey. So let's hear about your story. How the world knows Karen Wilson today.
Do you want me to start from early childhood, or do you want me to just where we are, a snapshot today? How
I
the
feel
world.
snapshot today, career especially. You've had a very exceptional career path. You could talk about childhood if you like.
Okay. No, there's no point going back that far.
We will go there eventually, though. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Uh, well, career-wise, I've always been involved in the tech industry, and starting out in my 30s, I'm 63 now. I've been involved in major Fortune companies, Pearson Publishing, big publishing houses. I've held many, many different roles there. And then I got involved in startups in the late 90s, and I've probably developed and launched up to, I think I'm at like 12 startups, some my own, some other people that I was consulting with or mentoring. So, and again, it's all tech related, but media, my wireless, really even online health. I've done a little bit of everything just because everything's interesting to me. I don't have one particular niche. So currently I'm doing a biotech company. So that's the range.
And what has your timeline been like with regards to success and challenges, successes and failures, for example? What have you experienced throughout that journey?
A lot of failure for sure, because the success rate is pretty narrow for startups. Um, Given coming from a trauma background, that was perfect for me. It was a lot of high intensity, a lot of very high risk, which I lived on. I mean, it was fuel for me. But yeah, I think out of the 12 that I mentioned, there were four of them that were mine, and there was only two successes. So, that's a 50% success rate. Um, I contribute a lot of that to just the right people that came around me, that funded the companies, that mentored me, but also just my tenacity. And because I come from a trauma background, we just don't quit.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I've had two successes, and I think this current company will be another one as it's shaping up. Again, that's just, I have the ability to recruit great people and to surround myself with great team. So,
And the reason why I asked about failure is because I know Karen's very successful and she's had her successes, but the failure is the part that I'm more curious about because of past experiences and how the past and the personal life has come into play on some of these challenges in life. And I'm also speaking from experience as well. And Karen and I have had some parallels with our life journey through our personal journey, but also reflected of the work journey as well, with our successes that we've had and the failures that we've had as well. So let's go into your past. So let's go into the childhood story of yours and tie it all together with regards to what has happened in the past. And please feel free to share
yeah,
as much information as you feel comfortable.
yeah. And I'll tie in some of the failures because they were
Mhm.
colossal too. So, The successes were small, the failures were colossal. So my childhood consisted of, post-war family, people coming back from the war, not really knowing if they had careers or not, or work. My father was third generation timber farming, very poor, big landowner, and my mother was a beautician. And so there's no birth control, and they started having children. So I grew up in a very pathos type of environment growing up. My father was a rageaholic and probably untreated PTSD, more than likely, medicating with alcohol. Thank God there was no drugs at that point. It was just, that was the drug of choice. So a lot of, I don't know if you've seen the movie The Great Santini, a lot of control, a lot of, basically, I was a Stockholm syndrome kid. I didn't really know how to behave. I didn't know how to function without this tyranny of thinking that anything could happen at any given moment, because it did. There'd be explosive outburst, or wake up in the middle of the night and line up like, you're going to your death, you're going to be executed, and we're on vacation and we all have to go home. So there was that constant undercurrent of trying to save the rest of the family, who was very, who they were all, I had a younger brother, older sister, and a mother, and they were all not fighters. And I was an Aries and very fiery, and cowgirl, rodeo riding, barrel racer. So I had a lot of fight in me. And I think I probably came out of the womb just resisting the whole scenario. And my mother was, women of that generation were very weak. They were subservient, even though they made great livings. My mother was very successful in her hair salon business, but I don't know, they were just more subservient. So I ended up being the savior of the family. I fought back. I had a lot of physical abuse. Mostly the most traumatizing for me was the psychological. The physical I could understand, you get hit and you recover. But the psychological was so insidious that you never knew when it was going to happen, what you'd done wrong. So it set me up for a lot of insecurity growing up, a lot of rebellion. I became, by the age of 12 or 13, I was a hardened, I think, criminal, in my mind. So I went from cheerleader to top of the class to pot smoking, 14-year-old going to raves, and, being a bad girl. So there's no in between for me at that point. And so by 16, I ran away from home. And I ran probably because my mother had run away at 16 to San Francisco. And I remember looking at those pictures growing up saying, that would be a really good place to go. Or anywhere but here, really was the motto that I had. So my brother accuses me of running away from home as soon as the ink dried on my birth certificate. It was really not until I was 16 that I ran. And also I grew up in Arkansas, which is a very oppressive place culturally, and really hasn't changed much. So I ran to freedom. I ran to the coast. I initially ended up in Seattle, London, and then San Francisco, and then landed there for 30 years about.
And going into the traumas, so this is connecting the dots with the experiences and what's happened in the past, and how the psychological imprints have impacted relationships and your career, and the patterns, the subconscious patterns that had formed. But I'm sure in early life, it wasn't understood that there were patterns playing out, and that it was affecting relationships and affecting career. And this is part of this journey, and what we've also, both Karen and I, have experienced through this work that we're both practicing. the awareness of how the subconscious patterns play into so many aspects of our life, of what we create, how we live, how we react, how we see reality. So how did your past, your childhood, affect your interpersonal relationships, your love, your career, the failures that you mentioned?
It impacted everything, and I think I didn't really start waking up to that until I was 40s, in my early 40s, and then couldn't do enough work to try to fix it. I was absolutely convinced I was broken and I needed to be fixed, and I did pretty much every healing modality available, and every retreat, and every journey, and every psilocybin journey, and I did the whole spectrum starting at about the age of 41. And so, how it affected my life is that um, a banker once asked me if I was in a witness protection program. And I laughed hysterically, but then I looked up and she was serious. And I said, "Why do you ask that?" And she said, "Well, you've moved a lot."
Mm.
And I said, "Oh, yeah, that's just something I do." So I was constantly moving. I constantly wanted to escape. I felt like I was trapped wherever I was or whatever relationship I was in. I always felt trapped. The
Mhm.
minute someone would propose marriage, I would have an affair and get out of it. Just getting that entrapment thing was something I couldn't break free of, no matter what I did. Um, and then I met two very specialized trauma therapists. One was Gestalt trained. He'd also done a lot of body movement work. And I probably did 2 years worth of therapy with them, where I would go to Atlanta and sit for 3 or 4 days with them and really did a ton of unwinding. But it was really more on the spectrum of not running, not being triggered, and unwinding a lot of that had been just, I mean, I'm 5'9" and I weighed about 115 pounds. I was working like a dog in all of my companies. I was thin, skin and bone, and just a machine, just, still pushing really hard. So they helped stabilize that somewhat. I was able to get in a first long-term relationship. It was 8 years. All of my other relationships had been 3 to 4 max. And it would always end in the same pattern of, you know, high romance, no real foundation whatsoever, and then heartbreak, and then someone leaves. It was pretty much the pattern. Or I would run and not get married. So um, that was the pattern. I worked with these two guys that helped a lot. Um, and then I probably came to the conclusion that if I got into a normal relationship, that would help stabilize me. So I got into a normal relationship with a brain surgeon, and I thought, this is normal. And underneath that, the context of that relationship, it wasn't normal at all. He had just as much scar tissue as I had, and everyone before him had had tons of trauma scar tissue. So his was abuse by a Catholic priest. And so wherever I was, I would find, in whatever relationship, I would find myself over and over again. And I would be the person trying to fix them and completely ignoring myself at that stage. If I was in a relationship, I was just working and I was machine and doing that. So that all came to an crashing end at my late 50s, because I ended that relationship. Um, and I have still no clue why I decided to move back pre-COVID to my home state of Arkansas, but it ended up being exposure therapy from what I had run from when I was 16. And did some trauma EMDR therapy, and then I met you. And my experience with the readings that you did initially were, um, it was monumental, because it was as if someone had been there. I'm emotional about this,
Mm.
because it was such an emotional feeling of like someone had actually witnessed what I had been subjected to, and they were able to articulate what I felt exactly. And by hearing that, I literally felt my nervous system let go. And I was hanging on tight to a past relationship. It was a very short lived relationship, but my whole world crashed down around that. And really, what was happening is I was personally imploding. I could not do that anymore. So after doing the reading with you and you offering those readings, I felt like whoever this man was, I just wanted to thank him, because it was as if he was there, a witness to what I endured throughout not just my childhood, but through my whole life, that I had been carrying this incredible infrastructure of broken psychological stuff and beliefs that just wasn't true.
Mhm.
And it was that, people say awakening is the end of the illusion.
Yeah.
Well, that's what was breaking apart, is these illusions, these conclusions that I had came to about myself because of the way my parents had treated me, that were so completely inaccurate. So, full circle to having a session with my therapist today. And she asked me how I just went through this certain situation that I went through. And I said, I feel like it was finally me. This, we call it the adult me, but it's just me that has emerged, because I don't know, the readings tend to eradicate those beliefs. And I initially, I recorded a few, as you know, and I tried to re-listen to them, and it didn't matter. It was done. It was finished. When we read through them after, a couple of times, it was finished. So where it's taken me now is, I probably would have failed in this current business because I was really acting from a place of trauma, with, it was a very traumatic situation, difficult founders, difficult this and that. And I have completely turned it around inside of me. And therefore the company has turned around. Um, it's monumental. So I think this work is something that you could save yourself decades of doing what I did, which is your life. I really look back, and it was my life, it was my experience, but it was certainly not, some of it or most of it didn't really lead to relief. So who knows? I mean, it's a subtle science. I do believe that this is a science that happens, that changes your chemistry. Um,
Mhm. Um, do you mind if I also mention, I will go into the work itself and how it works, and how we work together. Karen, I really enjoyed working with you because you were ready. You were in a place where
I was.
you were done with the old life. You were shattered open. You were tired. You were exhausted. You were at your end, and emotionally, energetically, physically, psychologically. I saw you. You look different. Your energy is different.
I was at the
And
death portal. That's really where
you
I was at the,
absolutely,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
wanting it
absolutely.
to end, wanting the misery to end. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's also where I was when I started doing this work myself. So I had worked with a healer, um almost three, it'll be coming up to 3 years ago. And I was at that place myself. And I mean, different experiences, but same time where it was enough. Something had to change. And it opened up a whole new network of, I almost feel like it opened up a neural network, in some kind of way of understanding and creating that distance of life experiences. And every time I was read these verses, because there's reading the verses, but there's also that energetic connection with the client. And from my side, I really feel into the client. I got to know Karen very well. I think we worked for 3 months together, twice a week.
Yeah.
So Karen was very committed, and the energy between the two of us and the way that we worked together like one. Like I really felt into her energy. I listened very well. I started understanding her story. So I started understanding where I could go with this, and also kind of push into the future. I'll start like aligning with, because at the beginning too, you didn't know, you didn't have purpose. You didn't know who you were. And I remember that. I remember you mentioning a few times, I don't know my purpose. And there was this feeling of uncertainty with life. And that's also where I was as well when I started doing this work. And I do
Lost. Yeah.
very lost. Yeah, absolutely. And I see this now, it's coming back, it's coming back, it's coming back, which is so beautiful and profound. And I also want to mention this realization that you experienced, that you had with your with your parent, between your parents. And these moments of realization change our reality and open up for more. And this is part of if you think again of everything as energy, and when we're holding on to a memory or an idea of our past, then it almost gets stuck there, and we hold on to that energy or that memory or that understanding, and but it prevents us from more. It prevents us from that opening that we need for healing, for transformation, for creation, for manifestation, for releasing. And the one that really stuck out for me, that you experienced, was you had a very strong feeling towards your father, that your father was really difficult, and there was a really difficult relationship there. But then through this work, you realize the mother aspect of it, and that was the more psychological side of things. So we can't forget, we may have a huge impact on one area of our life of a kind of abuse there, but then there's also the other sides of the psychological, the emotional, that we don't feel, but over time it creates patterns. It creates those really unconscious, subconscious programs within us that we don't see and we don't recognize. It's
The mother wound was a complete shock to me because
Mhm.
she was such a victim that I didn't, you coddle victims, you take care of them. But the pattern after I saw that and after we worked on it, then the pattern just rippled back throughout my life
Mhm.
of every founder, every business I'd worked for, there was always this collapsed, belligerent person that I kept trying to prop up and make, whole and get things rolling. It was my mother. My mother had been predominantly, the force in my life that had completely exhausted me and drained me. And I was currently working with this biotech company, and it was resolved because I stopped. It's that easy, right? When you realize, oh, that's my pattern, and you back up and you go,
Mhm.
I don't need to engage with this anymore. And I
Exactly.
stopped.
Yeah.
So yeah, the mother was the biggest shock to me because my dad was clear, what had happened there. It's very clear that there was abuse on every level. So mother was the mystery
Mhm.
surprise.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and exactly, I like how you touched on, and I witnessed this within our sessions as well, how your relationships at work started to change because of these realizations, and because of the understandings that you had of yourself and what was happening on a psychological level or on an emotional level. So how did that change your, over the last few months, your interactions with relationships, your ability to work through stressful situations, and your interpersonal comprehensions of other people's stuff?
It's really helped me use I guess, the framework that I healed in a more productive way. So I've used it at work, really just to motivate people and inspire people. You can use that same pattern that you were trying to carry people, but you can use it to motivate and inspire. So I've been doing more of that. I've let people be themselves, that's without trying to control them. So I don't have to control the universe. And that's been such a relief to my nervous system, not feeling like I have to carry people. In relationship, I think I've attracted someone who will at the very least be a lovely friend, but the quality, and I've attracted a new girlfriend here locally, and the quality of those two relationships um, are so incredibly significant to me as a reflection of what I value in life. I value spirituality. I value wisdom teachings. I value intellect, all of these things that are just front and center with these two people that feed me. So more of that, please. It's like
Mhm.
I've been so starved for that, and I didn't know how to generate it because I was flatlined. And so when we started doing this work for those 3 months, one of the things that happened to me was that I didn't move for 3 months. People say, you need to stop, you need to go inside yourself, create your cave. It was impossible to do anything, but I spent most of the summer on my back on my patio looking up at the sky and just letting all of this integrate. Um, there wasn't a lot of tears or gnashing of teeth. It was just deep integration of just letting it all happen internally. So the outcomes now are really beautiful. I feel happy in life. I don't feel depressed, which is crazy. That's like waking
Beautiful.
up not depressed, waking up happy, waking up singing, um, being optimistic. Yeah, it's all
Well,
different.
as your energy is very different than where you were, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
moving into that the law of attraction and what we attract. And I've had those situations as well where in work and relationships where it's, oh, this is my father, this is my mother, this is playing out. And now you have the awareness. It's the awareness that heals, and that's key that you moved into, and then now putting it into practice. And now you've changed your reality. Now you're calling in the healthy relationships. You have greater awareness within yourself. Your work environment is easier to maintain and to navigate. I mean, it's a complete turnaround, and really only in such a short period of time, honestly.
Oh,
three
it's
months, four
crazy.
months.
four
Yeah.
months total.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the intuition that I had, so because I was at such a desperate point, having tried most everything, um, was there was an intuitive sense when I heard your tarot reading. I enjoyed it. But beyond that, there was something else. And so for you to bring that up, would you like for me to do some clearing? It was like that was that aha moment of like, oh, this is the reason why,
Mm.
right? The tarot plus this whole other thing, which I was, like you said, wide open to receive.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah, and I really did enjoy working with you through all of it because it was just you were a sponge. You were just so ready for it. And I work with a pendulum for guidance, and it was just constantly moving, moving with Karen's energy. Just she was just so ready for the work. And yeah, and I feel that again, moving back to being in that place of readiness, or the end of the life, the old avatar, the old story, the old self that doesn't serve anymore. And you were at that point of wanting something new. So who are you now? Who are you now? Where do you see yourself going? Or is it still to be determined? I mean, you're embarking into a new chapter, but who would you say you are today versus 4 months ago or a year ago?
I'm a really peaceful, optimistic, and inspired person. So everything is inspiring me now to look at, oh, what do I do? What life do I want to live now? What do I want to build and create now? It's an opening.
Mhm.
There's just such a wide opening of what's possible. I definitely want to get out of business, but I definitely want to use my skills in the trauma, what I've gone through, my experience. I also want to use my skills in building something that's more humanitarian, um, because I think trauma is it's insidious. It's really at the core of what everybody's suffering with right now, and I don't think there are a lot of solutions out there. So yeah, I want my body of work going forward to be able to give back something around this, because I look at the 30 or 40 years that I spent, struggling in the desert as poetic now. I mean, I really have reframed it as who would have gone through that, right? And survived and flourished, even in the midst of it, and not be a hero. So I really flipped during our work from having a lot of shame about my past, feeling that the failures were awful. I had one huge public failure that's still studied in all the MBA schools, where I was called the Norma Ray of Silicon Valley, and I was one of the first female CEOs. So it doesn't get any more embarrassing than that. Um, and when I reframed the past through this work, I actually thought I should go back to San Francisco and throw a parade for myself,
Mhm.
because I was a fearless leader. I confronted one of the largest global money systems in the world, venture capital. I confronted $1 billion fund and I said, no. I mean, I really don't believe at what trauma and gave me incredible talents. And it also gave me this history that I now am proud of.
Mm.
I actually want to tell it and say, yes, this happened. And it wasn't me and it wasn't my trauma. It's the system. It's a lot of cultural trauma. It's societal trauma. And especially in business, there is so much trauma.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm inspired by my past, and I used to hate to talk about it,
Mm.
which is
Mhm.
crazy shift.
I like how you mentioned the toxic society or the toxic environment around corporate culture. And it's interesting how you're used as a case study today. And I mean, many people who have created great achievements or failures are used as case studies, but nobody really goes into the essence of that person, of who they really are, what they've really gone through, their own suffering, and what's led them to be today, who they are today. Instead, there's a lot of attacking, there's a lot of shaming, there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of criticism, there's a lot of jealousy, there's a lot of competitiveness, there's a lot of anger. It's a cesspool of people's traumas triggering other traumas, triggering
Yep,
other traumas. It's
that's right.
incredible.
Yeah.
And there isn't that pause and reflection of, it's so easy to look at someone who's done something wrong or right and judge them based on the surface value, surface information, rather than taking a moment and go, hold on a minute, let's look deeper into the story, let's look deeper into this person and what's created this outcome. There isn't that reflection. I mean, maybe in some smaller
No,
studies, but
there's not.
that is the broken part of our society right there.
And we're trying so hard to become public, through our work. We're trying so hard to actually achieve something. And so to get marginalized by a money system, or to get marginalized by people who are more in power than you are, is the culture, and it needs to shift.
Mhm.
I just think the entire thing is, you're right, it's kind of a bully culture. I wouldn't say toxic masculine. I think it's too broad of a term. I think it's really just the culture of business and in general. And there's really no rite of passage when you fail. And I think being a female, when I failed, I just disappeared for a few years. And when I came back off the mountain, literally, I had a few VCs, venture capitalists, say, "Where have you been?" And I said, "Well, I was pretty ashamed. I just kind of hid out." And they're like, "Why? Go write another business plan and I'll fund you." So it was that shift in, they would have thought nothing about, failing at a business. It's like, put another plan together and we'll get you funding. So it was a wake up call for me about how much, because of my trauma past, that I internalized it. And also because I was raised, at 63, I was raised at a time where women really didn't have much of a place or voice in business.
Mhm.
So I was way out in front, and you know, that's valuable now. It's really
Oh,
valuable,
absolutely. It's
you know.
only
And
going to pay off for your
yeah,
future endeavors to change the world in a positive light. And I did mention this in a previous podcast, and I can't remember exactly which one, but it was exactly what you just mentioned around how some people, depending on how they were raised and their conditioning and their subconscious programs, can bounce back. Some people can bounce back with no problem. They don't even think twice. They'll just jump right back into the ring and keep fighting. And some people will disappear because of the shame or the guilt or the fear that they have already embedded within their subconscious. that prevents them from returning and trying again. So it takes a lot of courage. So, I mean, Karen, you've done well, and
Thank you.
congratulations for all of your achievements. And thank you so much for sharing your story here. Is there anything that you would like, anything else you'd like to add before we
No,
close?
I just want everybody to be able to experience this because it was so life-changing and so profound for me of a shift in my internal being. So yeah, that's my only wish, is that anybody listening to this will try it, because
Mhm.
it is amazing. For
And I do have the Shadow project that's launching. Karen might be part of this in the future. We'll see if we can
Yeah,
keep working together in some form, but I'm launching with the Shadow project in a group environment, small group environment, to do this work and to form community and conversation around this, because also too, having these conversations is therapeutic in a way as well. It helps people to hear these stories, but it also helps to talk about it in a way of, again, creating that separation and opening up for understanding through the mode of communication and sharing these stories.
the really interesting thing that I wanted to add to that was, a lot of people say, you have to tell your trauma story, but so many people are too fractured to actually piece it together.
Mm,
And so I think that the real distinction of this is, I didn't need to try to tell you, well, all of this happened, here's my trauma story, blah, blah, blah. Here's how I internalized it. It was just the reading went straight in,
mhm,
just like honey, to where the places that needed fed and nurtured.
mhm.
So it's a place where you can just show up and you don't have to say anything. You'll get the healing, you'll get the message that you need to hear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there's no obligation to share stories. And, for me, I respect everyone's privacy and everyone's comfort levels. Mostly it's the work that's being received. And even as the process moves along, there could be a shift in wanting to talk about it and wanting to
Yeah,
express, so
absolutely.
yeah,
Which has
absolutely.
happened with me. I've never
Mhm.
told my story publicly. So,
Well, thank you. Thank
yeah,
you. I'm honored to have you here and to talk about it. And
me
I'm
too.
excited for your future. I know you are only going to create great impacts in this world. So I look forward to hearing more and seeing what is going to happen
Thank
in your
you.
near future. Mhm.
Yeah, thank you
All
so much.
right, Karen, thank you so much for being here again. For those listening and watching, the Shadow Project is now officially launched, and we start our first program on January the 6th, looking at emotions and triggers. So understanding our emotional reactions to things, how to process emotions, how to understand our emotions, and going deeper into ourself, going deeper into our core at looking at what is triggering us on the emotional level. That could be anger, sadness, depression, resentment, fear, anything that surfaces when we become triggered within ourselves. So if you have any questions, if you want more information on the program, I will leave a link below. And Karen, again, thank you so much for being here. I'm sure we'll be speaking soon in
Sure.
the near future.
Okay, take care.
Take care.